fandom in chaos. After intense backlash to the most recent theatrical releases, Star Wars has stayed as a streaming series exclusive franchise as the dreaded fandom menace struggles to keep its relevancy in a world growing weary of their bullshit opportunism. Now, 7 years later, Lucasfilm president Kathleen Kennedy sends two of her strongest warriors, Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau, to return Star Wars to the theaters where it belongs. But will it be enough to quell the rabid fanbase?
Yeah, I'm gonna save the life of the small round Yoda. Gonna fly high while we lie low. I'm gonna save the life of the small round Yoda. Gonna fly a long time ago. Welcome back to StillerBros at the Movies, where after a long gestating hiatus, Chewie, we're home.
So Chewie's not in this movie.
Whatever. Star Wars is back in theaters for the first time in 7 years, guys.
Yeah, and this particular movie is a different run for Star Wars.
So, up until this point, Star Wars, theatrically, has basically been about the same small group of people. Like, Rogue One was a little bit different in the sense that it was about a group of people we never followed before, and for most of them, never followed again. But Solo was a Han Solo prequel movie. The original trilogy, the prequel trilogy, and the sequel trilogy have all been dubbed the Skywalker Saga for the simple fact that they basically follow the same family of Jedi and smugglers and everything like that.
But this time around, we're going into the TV world of Star Wars, where this franchise has ultimately resided for the last 7 years.
Yes. So, The Mandalorian was the first big hit of Disney Plus, as evidenced by the fact that people who don't even have Disney Plus, never have, are still probably sitting on waiting for that one golden title to drop on it before they finally are like, fine, I guess I will download and pay for Disney Plus. Are aware of The Mandalorian and his young compatriot, Grogu, aka Baby Yoda, aka the child.
Yes.
And when I say young compatriot, I of course mean that he's 50 years old, whereas The Mandalorian... Well, the actor who plays the Mandalorian just turned 50.
Yeah, but ultimately, years ago, was the phenomena that put Disney Plus on the map as a streaming service was Baby Yoda showing up out of nowhere. Everyone was talking about it, so much so that when we were listening to the radio the day of Disney Plus's launch, having not actually watched The Mandalorian yet, we found out that there was a Baby Yoda. Thanks a lot, dickheads.
But... the important thing is that Baby Yoda is now a phenomenon. He became this cute little mascot for Star Wars. So much so that when Season 2 of The Mandalorian ended with Mando and Grogu seeming to go their separate ways, they quickly decided, we're going to reverse course and bring the two of them back together again.
Yeah.
Which you could say whether or not that was a mistake, all you want, but that's just what happened. We need to accept that that's what happened.
Yeah. But ultimately... after Season 2, we got a Season 3, which we've liked The Mandalorian. We loved the show. It was one of our favorite Star Wars things that have happened since Disney bought it out. But now, on the big screen, we have Mandalorian and Grogu.
So, in 2023, I don't know if we talked about this before, but there was kind of a big writers and actors strike right around the time that Lucasfilm would have been plotting out the ideas for Mandalorian Season 4.
And during this time, after the work stoppage, they decided, okay, we need something in theaters. Screw Season 4. Let's get a Mandalorian movie on the big screen.
So, instead of getting to work on Season 4, which supposedly is still very much on the table, Jon Favreau and his co-writers ended up working on a screenplay for a Mandalorian movie, The Mandalorian and Grogu.
Yes. And Jon Favreau has become kind of one of the creative leads of Star Wars just off of the strength of The Mandalorian. He has also obviously created and executive produced multiple shows for the Disney Star Wars streaming era. kind of becoming the Taylor Sheridan of this franchise, to be honest.
And the fact that he has written or co-written almost every episode of The Mandalorian. He wrote or co-wrote almost every episode of the Book of Boba Fett. He's been an executive producer on Ahsoka.
And Skeleton Crew.
And the Taylor Sheridan comparison is also the fact that Jon Favreau very much took the Star Wars branding and, well, he kind of decided on something that George Lucas decided on a long time ago.
I'm going back to my roots. Plots and characters lifted from westerns and samurai films. To the video store.
So now, with the fact that Star Wars is back to its roots as a half samurai, half cowboy space opera, we have the roadmap of what people want to see. At least that's what Disney and Lucasfilm hope. And so now we're playing in the Star Wars sandbox in a way that we have not been in a long time, because it's been 7 years since the last Star Wars movie. We've had a lot of starts and stops in the last 7 years since Rise of Skywalker, where it looked like we were going to get a Rian Johnson trilogy that never has materialized, or Taika Waititi was signed on to do a Star Wars movie that has yet to materialize yet too.
There was Benioff and Weiss, the creators of Game of Thrones, who were going to make a trilogy. Simon Kinberg apparently has a trilogy in development. There's a Rey movie that is still at some point happening. James Mangold's making a ancient Jedi origin story, and Patty Jenkins' the Starfighter movie.
But as it stands right now, Star Wars kind of struggled to figure out what their next move was after the Rise of Skywalker. And part of that was simply because Rise of Skywalker ended what was planned to be the main franchise, and part of that was the fact that Solo disappointed at the box office, and therefore any plans for an entire trilogy of Han Solo movies dissipated, because it looked like no one wanted to see more of that movie that we still contend was actually a pretty good version of what it needed to be.
Yeah, so much so that we are still excited for Donald Glover's Lando movie, if and when that eventually materializes.
And of course the pandemic happened almost immediately afterwards, which kind of threw a monkey wrench into every existing plan, not just for movies but also for TV shows, and also people who don't make entertainment for a living.
Yeah.
And so the question became, how do we do Star Wars in this age? What do we do when it looks like there are an entire group of people who are so dedicated to hating Star Wars because we made one movie that they turned into a divisive yet incredible classic? We still contend that Last Jedi is a masterpiece.
Yeah.
But when The Mandalorian took off, almost immediately afterwards, they started talking about the idea of, well, maybe one day we'll make a Mandalorian movie. And so, Mandalorian movie.
Yes.
And so, starring in the Mandalorian movie, we have, of course, the Mandalorian himself, Pedro Pascal, reprising his role. We have the various puppeteers who control Grogu. We have the various stuntmen who physically have portrayed the Mandalorian over the years.
We have Jeremy Allen White from The Bear taking on the role of Jabba the Hutt's son.
Which is kind of funny to me, because it means that this honest trailer joke is now completely inaccurate.
Oh, Stinky, you're a mistake no one will ever speak of again.
And we have, joining the Star Wars universe, Ms. Sigourney Weaver.
Sci-fi royalty, if there ever was any.
From Alien to Galaxy Quest to Avatar, Sigourney Weaver is basically sci-fi royalty, and so, obviously, she has to finally show up in a Star Wars thing.
Yes. And we also have Stephen Plum from the animated Star Wars universe taking on his role of Zeb.
Yes. The fact that Star Wars Rebels stuff is in here is probably mostly because Dave Filoni, the creator of Star Wars Rebels, is a writer on this movie and has been involved in The Mandalorian literally since episode 1 as an executive producer and director.
Yeah. But ultimately, we're kind of really stoked to see what this is going to be.
Yeah. Star Wars has been a franchise that's kind of been sitting idle for the last few years, in the sense that it felt like it hit a point where they were like, we're finally successful again. It seems like everybody seems to like us again. Let's do this. And then they were just like, okay, let's see if we can dip our toe back in and move back to theaters. Because the last 6 years, grifters all over the internet have been making hating Star Wars part of their personality. Their entire brand, even if their entire brand up until that point was making Star Wars content about how much they love Star Wars, have now made it their mission to complain online every single time Kathleen Kennedy breathes, in some attempts to basically say Star Wars used to be our thing, but now it's trying to spread out to a broader audience, and we don't like that because it means that the universe is leaving us behind. And guys, the universe is leaving you behind. The entire world is leaving you behind. Your ideas and your opinions, I understand that you feel very, very excluded because you yourselves are a bunch of exclusionary dickheads, but ultimately, fuck you, you're a fucking monster. Yes, in the immortal words of the man who almost directed Return of the Jedi, fix your hearts or die. Yes. So, yeah, that's our little rant about the people who use Star Wars essentially to get people angry and subscribe to their channels and everything like that. But importantly, Star Wars as a medium is not going anywhere. I don't think so, at least. Disney didn't buy Lucasfilm just so that they could throw it out at the first sign of trouble. Especially since Lucasfilm has already made Disney back the money they spent and then some. And you know why?
Merchandising, where the real money from the movie is made.
Thank you, Mel. The important thing is that The Mandalorian and Grogu has a lot of important things that it needs to jump into, and it needs to be clear. It's the first Star Wars movie in a post-pandemic world. It's the first Star Wars movie since The Rise of Skywalker. It's the first Star Wars movie in a long time. It's the first Jon Favreau movie since The Lion King 2019, so Jon Favreau has also been sitting idle for about 7 years. And it is also the last Star Wars movie before the 50th anniversary, which will more than likely be celebrated by both the re-release next year of the original Star Wars movie, while also being where they release Sean Levy's Star Wars Starfighter. Yes. What that's going to look like, we don't know yet, but we're a year out, so we don't know much about it, but it's interesting enough just on the basis that they have a massive actor headlining a Star Wars movie, which we have never had before. Even when the new sequel trilogy was coming out, people like Oscar Isaac and Adam Driver had mostly just been in like indie movies and pop and somewhat popular TV shows. It might be hard to forget, but Oscar Isaac and Adam Driver and all of them were not massive stars at the time they said yes to Star Wars. And neither were like Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher, or Harrison Ford. They all just ended up becoming massive stars because, shock of shocks, at one point, Star Wars was the #1 movie of all time. But even then, when they were still making new movies, the biggest star they had headlining one of their movies was Felicity Jones, who is not obviously a big A-list actor, even though she had an Oscar by the time she stepped into the Star Wars universe. And occasionally you'll get like a Woody Harrelson or someone jumping into it, but the idea of having A-list actors in a Star Wars movie is kind of odd. Even if it's something like this, where Pedro Pascal basically became an A-list actor because of his time in the Star Wars universe. Yeah. To the point that this is not even the only TV show where Pedro Pascal had to escort his magical child across wasteland where a series of monsters and killers are trying to stop them.
I'm not family.
No. You're cargo.
No, and we can thank Pedro Pascal, being a massive star now, for probably helping at least to get The Mandalorian and Grogu made, just because he has become a big movie star after the success of The Mandalorian. Obviously, he got his big breakout in Game of Thrones, but it was Star Wars that really kind of pushed him into superstardom. And now he basically gets to live his Star Wars dreams. So, yeah, we've got high hopes for The Mandalorian and Grogu, in case you couldn't tell. We're hoping that it's fantastic, and yeah, barring any other kind of rambling we've got going on, we'll see you after the jump. Alright, so we are now out of the movie, and yeah, it was a really good elongated episode of The Mandalorian.
Yeah. I thought it was a little long on certain points, but it's still a pretty good episode of The Mandalorian and stretched out to a feature length.
Yeah, so when it comes down to it, Baby Yoda is cute, the characters are great, the action is really good, and Jon Favreau continues to be a pretty solid storyteller.
Yeah, a lot of the comedy bits land because a huge stretch of movie is, well, not huge, but huge in comparison to a lot of other stuff, is based around Baby Yoda hanging out with the Anzellans, which it's just adorable on its face.
Yeah, Baby Yoda and the Anzellans are a pretty competent comedy team, so it's really funny to see them just hanging out, doing their thing, and also going on this like long adventure throughout the entire thing. It's really just a big puppet show, and it's clearly a chance for Jon Favreau to stretch comedic muscles he has clearly not been using a lot in the last few years.
A big part of it also is just the fact that it's just having these characters here and doing all this Star Wars-y stuff, even though this is the first Star Wars movie ever to not include any allusion to Jedi whatsoever.
It's a movie that takes place in the Star Wars universe, but it's the first one of these non-mainline Star Wars movies that doesn't feel like it needs to feel like a Star Wars movie. Specifically because, for the first time ever, we're working without any of John Williams' traditional themes. We do not have any mentions of Jedi. This is the first Star Wars movie to never include a character using a lightsaber. And it's also the first Star Wars movie with opening credits as opposed to closing credits, which is kind of weird because I know for a fact that George Lucas wanting just closing credits and no opening credits was a huge sticking point for him when it came to arguing with the Directors Guild.
Yeah, and ultimately it's kind of interesting to see this because at times I was sitting in the theater looking at the screen going like, this probably would have been an episode in season 4, this probably would have been an episode in season 4, like, there are times when it feels like they cut it down to make it into a feature-length movie, but it still feels like a movie.
And while it does feel a little bit disjointed between the first half and the second half, the first half feeling like its own standalone adventure that's going pretty much normal paced for a Mandalorian episode, the fact that it takes a while for the second half to acknowledge, oh yeah, there's a reason we did that entire first half, is a little interesting.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's stuff like Rada the Hutt, who is in the movie a lot more than I would have thought, and for at least the first chunk of his appearance in the movie, he is a little bit repetitive. I think he says, I want to be my own man at least 3 times in 3 different appearances before he actually gets to be a character within the movie.
Yeah, Rada is definitely treated interestingly enough just from the fact that we have not really seen this character since the original Clone Wars movie, and he has pretty much now where we're at in the story, he has a personality and goals and things he wants to achieve.
Actually, they even kind of, in a little meta joke, acknowledge this by pointing out to the audience, hey, here's a picture of him as a baby. He's kind of grown up since then.
Yeah, but it also helps contribute to the father-son dynamic of the movie, where we have the Mandalorian and Grogu sort of showing this father-son relationship, and at the same time we have Rhoda trying to get out of his dad's shadow.
Yeah, but the important thing is that in the middle of it all, there's the story of Mando and Grogu just kind of being their usual selves. Once again, it's a long episode of the show. It's basically a 2-hour-long episode of The Mandalorian. And it works as a 2-hour-long episode of The Mandalorian, including that stretch in the middle where it basically becomes the Dark Crystal.
All Jedi had was a bunch of Muppets.
Only with way cuter puppets.
How dare you? The Skeksis are adorable.
But the important thing is that this is also a movie that remembers that these characters shouldn't be trapped in amber, even though they kind of already are. There's not a lot in the way of character development in terms of where Mando and Grogu are at the beginning of the movie as opposed to where they are at the end.
No, but also just the fact that it's kind of, place in the timeline where you don't have to do your homework to go in and see it.
Essentially, the last season of The Mandalorian ended in a place where basically the status quo is reset. And so they kind of took advantage of that by being like, okay, let's send them on a new adventure within the context of this new reset status quo so that we can kind of just keep going. And if you really aren't aware of who the Mandalorian and Grogu are, the movie never leaves you hanging on that. Like, literally, it starts with a text screen explaining, hey, the Mandalorian and Grogu are a master and apprentice mercenary duo who are basically going off and fighting bad guys left over from the Empire from the original Star Wars trilogy.
Yeah, there's no talking about the other Mandalorians out there or any of the stuff that's been going on. We don't really get any of the recurring characters from the show.
And most of the acknowledgement of what happened before is just kind of like, okay, that's a thing that happened. Like, the Anzellans are the only real thing from the previous seasons that come back in any way, and they didn't get introduced till season 3.
Yeah. And obviously Zeb made a cameo in The Mandalorian, but he's a Star Wars character that's existed before The Mandalorian, and here you don't really need to know who Zeb is to dive into this movie.
Really, all you need to know is that there's this weird purple monkey man following the Mandalorian around for a small chunk of the movie, and then suddenly it's like, okay, and now let's just keep going. For all you know, he just works for the Galactic Republic. For all you know, this character does not have 4 seasons of television for you to get to know him before going to see The Mandalorian and Grogu.
No, and not knowing his backstory doesn't exactly change anything, but it's just like a fun little thing of, oh, hey, more animated Star Wars stuff in the live-action Star Wars stuff.
Yeah, if you don't know anything about who Zeb is from Rebels, you won't miss anything because this is not a check-in to see how Zeb has been doing since Rebels. This is basically a cameo from one of Dave Filoni's characters in this movie because Dave Filoni co-wrote the script.
Yeah, and obviously it's kind of him setting the board up for Ahsoka Season 2.
And there's like cute little Easter eggs here and there, like the Millennium Falcon chessboard gets yet another shout-outs. And Martin Scorsese showing up for a quick little cameo that got him actually billed with most of the rest of the cast.
For this price, I'll tell you whatever you want.
I'm looking for a hut.
Close for the night. Thank you.
Yeah, he's in 2 scenes, but he got billed before Sigourney Weaver in the opening credits.
But then again, Sigourney Weaver got the end credits.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's really clear that Sigourney Weaver is having the time of her life, especially when it's the 3rd act and they finally get her in an X-Wing.
And Sigourney Weaver belongs behind the stick of an X-Wing. It was just really enjoyable to see her get to stretch her Star Wars muscles, and hopefully we'll see more of her.
Maybe she'll be in season 4, maybe she'll be in future Star Wars movies, who knows. But for right now, we got Sigourney Weaver in a Star Wars movie, we got a bunch of cool Easter eggs in Star Wars movies, we've got a Star Wars movie that doesn't necessarily feel like it has to be this big grandiose space opera. Sometimes it can just be a pulpy little sci-fi action thing.
It's a very small scale movie compared to every other Star Wars movie, where even Solo felt like it had some life or death situations for the universe at large.
Yeah, here the stakes are very much self-contained for just what happens to the Mandalorian and Grogu. And that's kind of all you need. And I know that that's kind of a point of contention with some critical analysis, that it's like, oh, the stakes aren't high. It's just like a long episode. Where are the big grand stakes of anything like that? It's like, I don't think it needs that. I think the point of making standalone Star Wars movies for characters that did not have standalone projects beforehand is just to have stuff within the Star Wars universe without these grand over-the-top stakes. Sometimes the characters can just kind of exist in the Star Wars universe without having some kind of planetary destruction assured that will lead them to, okay, I guess this is the plot of the movie now.
And Ludwig Göransson definitely shows that with the fact that it's the same kind of score he did for the show, but he just epicked it up a little bit so it felt like a movie.
And more than that, he also gets to flex muscles that the regular show has not allowed him to up until this point, because he gets to do like trap beats and quiet acoustic pieces on guitar, or even during the end credits and before the ending, which you really don't have to stay through the credits. Star Wars is not really a post-credits scene kind of story, but during the credits, just before the ending, there's like this like folky, bluegrassy style version of the Mandalorian theme that is definitely something that I really liked. But yeah, I don't know what else to say. The Mandalorian and Grogu is just cheesy pulp fun with Muppets.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what else to say, and I don't know what else you would want from a Star Wars movie, because it's like, it's fun, it's Muppety, the Mandalorian is still badass, the Grogu is still the cutest little SLB you've ever seen. It's just a really good Star Wars movie, even and for those who probably could care less about what the next good Star Wars movie is going to be like. So, I think that's it for right now. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to this channel, leave in the comments what you may or may not have thought of The Mandalorian and Grogu. And don't forget to tune in next time when... Holy shit. Bye.
May the Schwartz be with you.